Longevity isn't just about living longer, it's about living better and being able to do the things that you like to do and partake in the things that you enjoy.
If someone, marketed a pill that cut your REM sleep by 30%, raised your resting heart rate, and was also a carcinogen, nobody would take it. But if you wrap that in a bottle labeled Bordeaux, right, all of a sudden it's like self-care.
So many of our patients that come to see us, I think that's their fear, is that they have to give up everything that they enjoy. And that's just not the case.
Running from death. Can fitness outpace alcohol's harm?
This is $1 million question that you guys have all been waiting for. Can exercise protect you from alcohol intake?
The answer is...
Welcome to MD Longevity Lab, where we're playing the long game. This is a podcast where science meets real life, with expert insights, practical tips, and real-world tools to not only live longer, but live better. Our aim is to radically change the way medicine is practiced and enable individuals to age gracefully, maintaining health span and vitality well into their later years. We're your hosts, Dr. Nisha and Dr. Vikas Patel, physicians, partners in life, and parents balancing work, wellness, and everything in between. Let's dive in.
Welcome back to the MD Longevity Lab podcast. Thanks for listening, guys. Nish, how are you doing?
I am great. How are you doing?
I'm not bad. You ready to get this show on the road?
I am ready. Today, we are diving headfirst into one of the most debated topics in the health and wellness space right now.
And one of our listeners' favorite topics.
Yeah, and that's alcohol. We get asked about alcohol consumption all of the time.
How much we drink.
Yeah.
Do we drink?
Yeah.
Everyone accuses us of not because we're healthy people.
Yeah.
So specifically, we're going to talk about, can exercise protect you from the negative health effects of drinking alcohol? Because let's be honest, if you're listening to a longevity podcast, there's a decent chance you may also occasionally enjoy a glass of wine or two, or
maybe 3 sometimes. But it's a great topic because we are just coming off our spring break trip. We went to Whistler to ski, so that was pretty fun. And we skied hard, and we opera skied. I opera skied harder than I skied.
I don't think I opera skied that hard.
You skied really hard.
I skied hard, which made drinking not that easy because I was like too exhausted.
Yeah, and I think I opera skied as long as I skied.
That might be true.
But no, we would definitely go back to Whistler. It was pretty awesome. That was our first time there with the kids.
Yeah, they had a great time. Kids were literally, there's these apps now that you can track how fast you're skiing, and also how much you skied, how much vertical feet you cleared. And the kids were all trying to get better times. And the boys were over 50 miles an hour, right?
You were like 65 miles an hour. Max was like 60. Luke was 55. Aria was 46. And I was pulling up the rear with 30 miles an hour peak speed.
It's fast.
Yeah. I'm still waiting for the call from Red Bull, but
Lindsey Vohn's out of a job now. So
I know.
Any day now.
Yep. That's how I feel when I'm going down a green.
I had no comments.
No, but we get asked about this a lot. I'm really glad we're covering this topic of alcohol because not only is it's in the conversation now, but in the longevity space, there's a ton of absolutionists that don't drink. They don't eat out. And for us, I think that's more of the deprivationist approach to things. And we do want to talk about balance because longevity isn't just about living longer. It's about living better and being able to do the things that you like to do and partake in the things that you enjoy, which sometimes that's good food. Sometimes that's cocktails with friends. And these longevity self-appointed experts, it's like they are so obsessed with their sleep trackers, bio trackers. They honestly just get caught up in the noise. And to me, that's not living. To each their own, I guess. But for us, I think
I'm okay with the people tracking, but I don't think it's like, it's not necessary, right? Like, you get most of the benefit of healthy habits without tracking every metric. Like, some people I think are just wired that it settles them mentally to track things. I think for other people it causes them anxiety. We're kind of in the middle of that stuff. We track some stuff, but we don't get anxious about any of it. And really, like, our goal is to enhance the quality of our life and enjoy the things that we enjoy. And then, more to the topic of this podcast, right? Like, is it possible to offset some of our bad habits with good habits? And I think that's really this game that the majority of the population, I think, plays to some degree, right? Like, if you're going to stay up late to catch a game or binge Netflix, right? You're compromising your sleep for that night. Can you make up for that in some way by catching up on sleep or exercising a little bit more? And so I kind of got interested in this topic a little bit on, like, well, if you're pretty good and consistent about exercising, does that offset some of this risk from something like alcohol?
And I think it's a great question because so many of our patients, I think that's a burning question for them. Well, I want to live longer, but what if I don't want to completely be abstinent? What if I still want to have my glass of wine or my cocktail when I go out with friends? So it's definitely an important topic, and I'm so excited to cover it.
Yeah, and I mean, we should cover just like the public health messaging. You know, both the World Health Organization, the US Surgeon General have come out with very firm stances that there's really no amount of alcohol that is truly risk-free. It does not have health benefits. So that disclaimer should be out there.
Yeah. And as you can imagine, that went over real well at dinner parties everywhere.
Of course.
We went to a party and some guy sniffed your drink to see if you were drinking alcohol because you're in the quote unquote longevity space. It was pretty awkward.
That did happen a month ago. Yeah.
That was uncomfortable.
It is what it is.
And he's like, he was surprised. He's like, "Oh, you drink." It's like,
yeah, moderation.
Yeah.
Right. So we're going to take a look at the actual science here, not just kind of the clickbait headlines and not your neighbor's anecdote about his grandpa who drank bourbon every day and lived to 97. The real peer-reviewed data. We're going to go over what alcohol does to your body, what exercise does to possibly offset some of that damage, and whether there's a sweet spot where you can have your Cabernet or your whiskey and perhaps still be okay.
Like, have your Cabernet and drink it too. Like, have your cake and eat it too.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's a good one.
That was a good one.
Is that where you were going with that one?
No.
Oh. That's where I was going.
It's just riffing.
No.
Okay, so let's kind of dive into this. I'll go through some of the fundamentals. I think, a lot of people know that alcohol is bad in the same way that they, know the sun is hot. Technically, that's correct, but what does that actually mean for your biology? Ethanol, which is the ingredient of alcohol, is metabolized by your liver through a two-step process. There is an enzyme called alcohol dehydrogenase. It converts alcohol into acetaldehyde, which is a known carcinogen, and then aldehyde dehydrogenase converts that to acetate, which the body excretes or burns as energy. The problem is that acetaldehyde is toxic. It damages our DNA, drives oxidative stress, and forces your liver to run at like 150% capacity. Eventually, if it has enough exposure, things break down.
Yeah. And I think it's important to mention that alcohol has zero nutritional value, right? It's not good for us. It literally is just 7 calories per gram that it adds to our intake. It's just empty calories, right? So no protein, no fat, no carbohydrate, no nutritional value.
Just so people know, 1 gram of carbs has 4 calories in it. 1 gram of protein has 4 calories in it, and 1 gram of fat has 9 calories in it. So at least all of those things our body needs on some level. Like we can't live without all 3 of those substrates. We can 100% live without alcohol. The 7 calories we get per gram of alcohol has no nutritional value whatsoever for us.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean you have to stop drinking. It just means you're aware of this knowledge so you can make an informed decision.
You want to talk a little bit about some of the cancer risk?
Yeah. So we're going to go through each organ system just to highlight, because I think it's pretty enlightening for patients. Like, we have fairly educated patients, and a lot of them don't know that there's a ton of other risks associated with alcohol. We know about liver disease, but I think it's important that we just kind of briefly go over all the organ systems. So cancer risk, this one rarely gets talked about at cocktail hour, but alcohol is a group 1 carcinogen. And that's in the same category as asbestos and tobacco. There is a dose-response relationship that exists for cancers, and those are cancers of the mouth, the throat, esophagus, liver, colon, and even breast cancer. Even 1 drink a day carries a measurable increase in breast cancer risk. And that, again, this doesn't mean you have to eliminate it, but it is a risk that you should all be aware of.
In 20 plus years in the ER, the number of patients who literally had no idea that their drinking was a cancer risk factor is kind of staggering. People connect smoking to lung cancer. Almost nobody is connecting that their nightly wine drinks are linked to both breast cancer and colon cancer. And that's not necessarily their fault, right? For decades, the messaging was moderate drinking is actually good for your heart. And we'll debunk that in a minute.
All right, let's move on to sleep disruption. I think you guys are all familiar with this. We've covered this in previous podcast episodes. Alcohol is the oldest sleep aid in human history, and it's terrible at that job. We used to use alcohol as a sedative sometimes. And yes, it definitely does help you fall asleep faster, but sedation itself isn't sleep. Just like when we give patients anesthesia, they're not actually sleeping, they're just being sedated. So alcohol suppresses that rapid eye movement sleep, that restorative phase of sleep where your brain is consolidating memory and it's clearing that neurological waste from your system. So even 2 drinks can reduce that quality REM sleep by 20 to 40%.
Yeah, there's this rebound effect. So as your liver starts metabolizing the alcohol in the second half of your night, your sympathetic system starts to activate. And that's the system that actually causes more awareness rather than the rest and digest system, which is our parasympathetic. So that really leads to fragmented sleep, elevated heart rate, and early waking. There's a double whammy, and poor sleep is linked to every one of the 6 horsemen that we've talked about previously: cardiovascular disease, insulin resistance, neurocognitive decline. So if your heart rate variability, your HRV, is in the tank and your fasting glucose is starting to creep upwards, look at what's happening really between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. If someone, marketed a pill that cut your REM sleep by 30%, raised your resting heart rate, and was also a carcinogen, nobody would take it. But if you wrap that in a bottle labeled Bordeaux, right, all of a sudden it's like self-care.
So I'm putting that on a t-shirt.
There we go.
So when I was opera skiing and, at 2 a.m., I'd be like, I just had to get up to pee, and then my heart rate would be up and I'd be a little sweaty. I thought it was from really skiing hard.
It's actually technically it's actually kind of like a mini alcohol withdrawal, right? Like, we all know about people who are heavy drinkers who actually get true alcohol withdrawal, which can actually be life-threatening, cause seizures. But just having 2 or 3 glasses of name your drink, our body goes through this mini withdrawal as the alcohol leaves our system. Just drinking 2 or 3 drinks, as our metabolism digests that alcohol and the alcohol is leaving our system, our body goes through this mini withdrawal, and that's what that sympathetic drive is. Initially, alcohol is actually a little bit of a sedative, but as it leaves our system and our body's like, wait, what happened? It overstimulates and activates that sympathetic drive. So that's what that awakening is, and that kind of mini raise of your heart rate becomes.
Yeah, it's just harder as we get older. You could have a few cocktails in your 20s and sleep just fine. And I feel like as we get older, you really feel it.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about how alcohol really affects the liver. So, alcohol associated liver disease is the most common cause of advanced liver disease, literally worldwide, and a leading indication for liver transplants. More than 90% of heavy drinkers develop fatty liver, which is literally like deposits of fat within the liver that we can see on ultrasounds, MRIs, CT scans. And this is called steatohepatitis, fibrosis, and then ultimately it progresses to liver cirrhosis. And then the final destination on that train is hepatocellular carcinoma, which is unregulated growth of cells, which is what cancer is. So post-COVID, we've been seeing younger and younger patients in their 20s, 30s, and 40s presenting with that advanced disease. And that's a shift, and it has to do with two things. There was quite a bit of more drinking that occurred during COVID, and then our obsession with excess calories in this country. It's like a double whammy. If we're eating too much, we deposit extra fat in our liver. Combine that with drinking too much, and your liver is basically at its limit, getting these two different insults at the same time.
It's like pate,
I
but
know.
human pate. Isn't that what pate is? Like
Yes.
fatty duck liver?
Yes, but they don't drink alcohol.
But they just feed them fat, like fatty foods.
Are there duck farms?
I don't know. When I see prenupo MRIs, that full body MRI that we do on our patients, and they have fatty liver, I just think of pate. It's so gross. And I can't unsee it now.
Yeah, I hear you.
So, and I think it's important to note that women are more susceptible at equivalent intake levels. So you drinking 2 drinks is very, very different than me drinking 2 drinks. It hits me way harder, roughly twice the relative risk compared to men. And that's due to the difference in body composition, liver enzyme activity, and hormonal factors as well. And it's especially important as women drinkers. Our rates of drinking have increased over the years. So I think that's something to definitely be aware of.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a difference. Like, men carry more muscle mass. We actually have, in general, a little bit more of that alcohol dehydrogenase in our liver, which confers a little bit more protection than what women get. Let's kind of go through some of the cardiovascular myths and kind of make that pretty clear for patients on what the effect of alcohol is as far as our cardiovascular health.
Yeah, that was like the prevailing thought process, right, for years, that red wine is good for our heart, right? We're trying to protect our heart and prevent stroke, and it thins out the blood. So the idea that moderate drinking protects your heart is that textbook case of what we call observational data that's misleading us. The abstainer group, so those are the patients that abstained from alcohol in those early studies, included many former drinkers who quit because they were already sick. And that we call that the sick quitter effect. They're so sick that they can no longer drink. When you control for that, and for the fact that moderate drinkers also tend to be wealthier, more active, have better healthcare access, have time to exercise, that protective effect largely disappears. So when you eliminate all those other factors, I mean, it's just crazy. We've basically misled society for 2 or 3 decades.
Yeah, I think, these studies were looking at people who were drinking red wine, and that's not necessarily the drink of choice for the majority of alcohol drinkers, right? Like in France, it might be the drink of choice, but Europeans have a far different lifestyle than what Americans do. That's kind of the bottom line is, we're not telling you that you can drink red wine for your heart. Like, that era basically is over. It's been proven multiple times through numerous studies now that there is just no beneficial cardiovascular effect.
So if you're drinking because you want to drink. You are not drinking for your health.
Yes, there are social benefits to drinking. There's an anxiolytic effect of alcohol. So there are other benefits that are not necessarily the the health metrics that we would want to promote as far as longevity and general health go. Why don't you touch quickly on some of the other facts like brain, gut, immune system?
Yeah, so we'll wrap up real quick with the organ system. We know that alcohol disrupts the gut microbiome, it increases intestinal permeability, and it drives systemic inflammation. It also impairs immune function, which is your ability to heal and recover from infection. And there's growing evidence of neurotoxic effects at even moderate levels. And this is measured by brain volume, and that is reduced on imaging studies.
I remember in college, like having a sore throat, and one of my buddies would be like, "Oh, just like do a couple shots," because like the alcohol will literally kill the virus or the bacteria in your throat. And like actually trying that, and obviously it didn't work.
I think they did that back in the olden days, like give kids like a spoon of bourbon or something.
Like the 1900s.
Maybe. That's the olden days. Well, our kids
That's
think
what our kids think.
no, our kids think they literally said we were born in the olden days because we were born in the 1900s.
Yeah, that's
Crazy.
kind of sad.
Yeah.
So when we say negative health effects, we're not talking about just like one thing. We're talking about a systemic insult to virtually, every major organ system in our body, which really brings us now to the big question.
Yes. This is $1 million question that you guys have all been waiting for. Can exercise protect you from alcohol intake?
The answer is maybe. This is where the research gets really interesting, and where I think we can give people really a evidence-based and nuanced answer rather than just like the finger wagging. The study that made the biggest splash recently was published in Sports Medicine in December of just this last year, and it's by this Dr. Naumann, and out of a Norwegian University of Science and Technology, and it's got a fantastic title. Running from Death. Can fitness outpace alcohol's harm?
Literally, with a title like that, I think it's begging to be a podcast episode. That was intriguing. It was like, we have to find out the answer to this.
Inquiring minds want to know.
Yeah.
So here's the study design. They analyzed data from nearly 25,000 healthy Norwegian adults who participated in two large health surveys about a decade apart. The HUNT 2 survey in the mid-90s and the HUNT 3 in the mid-2000s. They were then followed for about 17 years. Alcohol intake was self-reported and classified into three groups. So there's the abstainers, and then there's the within recommended limits group, and then the above recommended alcohol limits group. Here's the interesting part about the fitness piece of this. They didn't actually do like dedicated VO2 max testing on 25,000 people. They used a validated non-exercise prediction equation based on age, waist circumference, resting heart rate, and self-reported physical activity to classify people as either fit or unfit. The unfit group was the bottom 20% for estimated fitness for their age and sex. And really, the results were pretty remarkable. Why don't you break those down?
So let's cover the bad news first. Increasing your alcohol intake over the decade of your life was associated with a higher mortality rate, period. And that held regardless of fitness level. So irrespective of whether you were in that fit or unfit group, it didn't matter. So anyone out there that is listening that was hoping that, drink as much as you want as long as you run a marathon, right? Sorry. That's not true. Even the lead author, Dr. Naumann, said he wished the data had shown fitness could completely cancel out alcohol's harms, but it didn't.
Here's kind of where I think it gets a little bit more nuanced. Among people who remained fit throughout the study, changes in alcohol intake generally did not significantly increase their mortality risk. The one exception was people who went from abstaining to now drinking. That transition did actually carry an elevated risk.
And here's the finding that raised a lot of eyebrows. Fit drinkers had better survival outcomes than unfit abstainers. Let's say that again. Being fit and drinking moderately was associated with a longer life than being sedentary and not drinking at all.
That's a pretty powerful finding, right? And I want to be careful on how we frame that because it doesn't mean just like go ahead, have at it, drink as much as you want. It means that fitness is such a powerful determinant of longevity that it can, to some degree, buffer the harms of moderate alcohol use.
Yeah. And on the flip side, those remaining in the bottom 20% of fitness, the unfit category, carried a 46 to 68% higher mortality risk, even among people who drank within the recommended guidelines. So the biggest risk factor in this study wasn't how much people drank, it was how unfit they were.
Declining from fit to unfit over the decade predicted mortality more strongly than many patterns of changing alcohol intake. And that's really important takeaway for our listeners. If you're going to pick one battle, the data suggests pick fitness. So basically,
I'm nipping at the heels of elite level VO2 max, so I can still opera ski all day, is what you're saying.
There you go. That is basically what I'm saying.
In conclusion,
this fits nicely into kind of the premise of our clinic and the premise of the podcast, right? That like there's such a downside to being sedentary and not challenging your body in some ways that you're actually even protected from some of the things that we know are a poison to our body if you manage to stay in decent shape. And that protection is literally better than if you abstain from that poison alcohol and you just sit on the couch all day.
yeah, that is so impressive. And I think it's awesome because so many of our patients that come to see us, I think that's their fear, is that they have to give up everything that they enjoy. And that's just not the case. So while we know there's the social benefits, like you talked about, connection when it comes to alcohol, but there's no nutritional benefit. There's no health benefit to alcohol. But patients ask us, is it something I have to give up if I care about my health? And I think our question is not necessarily, but you can't sit on your butt, be sedentary, have a low VO2 max, drink all day, and expect good health and longevity.
I think you hit the nail on the head. So there are some caveats here, and I think we need to cover that because this is a science podcast, not TikTok. So let's talk about some of the limitations to a study like this.
Yeah. So first, as we mentioned, fitness was estimated. It wasn't directly measured. They didn't do formal VO2 max testing. The model that they use is well validated for population level studies, but it's still a proxy for fitness, not a direct measurement like VO2 max.
Second, fitness is what we'd call a marker of health writ large. One of the alcohol epidemiologists who commented on the study, Dr. Timothy Namey from the University of Victoria, made this really excellent point. It's hard to fully separate the benefits of exercise from the benefits of simply being healthier overall. People who are fit tend to eat better, they tend to sleep better, they tend to have fewer chronic conditions, and they generally have better healthcare access.
Yeah. And third, the heaviest drinkers were likely underrepresented. Anyone drinking above the recommended limits was grouped into one category. So someone having 11 drinks a week was analyzed the same as someone having 30. The protective benefits of fitness may not extend to patterns of true alcohol abuse or super heavy binge drinking.
And the fourth thing is that this is an observational study, an observational cohort study, not a randomized controlled trial. So we can't say fitness causes lower mortality in drinkers. We can say it's associated with. There's likely some bidirectional causation and some confounding that we can't fully account for in a model like this.
Yeah, these are all important caveats, but even with those limitations, this is a large, well designed prospective study with 17 years of follow up. So that signal is pretty strong.
I think so. And this is not like an isolated finding. A 2017 pooled analysis published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine, it had looked at over 36,000 participants from 8 British population-based cohorts. They found that meeting current physical activity recommendations, which is the same in this country as in this population in Britain, about 150 minutes of moderate or 75 minutes of vigorous exercise per week significantly attenuated the association between alcohol intake and all-cause mortality.
Yeah. And in that same study, the association between alcohol and cancer mortality was nearly nullified among individuals who met the PA recommendations. So that's particularly striking given what we just discussed about alcohol being a group 1 carcinogen, right? There's a direct correlation to cancer.
Yeah, and which is being attenuated by their activity level. So attenuated and nearly nullified are not the same thing as eliminated, and the benefits were most pronounced for moderate drinkers. They didn't fully protect the heaviest drinkers in that harmful category, but for the large number of people who drink within or, modestly above the guidelines, exercise appeared to meaningfully reduce risk.
All right, let's move on to another study. There was some supporting data that came from the UK Biobank in 2020, and that analyzed nearly 300,000 adults. And they found that low physical activity individuals who consumed alcohol at double the guidelines had a 55% higher mortality risk compared to about 20% higher risk for moderate to high activity individuals who are consuming the same amount. So that's kind of crazy.
Yeah, double, almost triple the risk in the sedentary population.
So these patients drank the same amount, and then they analyzed the group who was exercising and the group who wasn't.
Correct. So physically active, heavy drinkers still had an elevated risk. Exercise didn't make the excess alcohol completely safe, but the gap between active and inactive heavy drinkers was quite substantial. There's also some pretty fascinating information about liver-specific protection. So I know a lot of people end up getting worried about, like, am I doing damage to my liver? A major new study that was published in the Journal of Hepatology in late 2025 by Vilar Gomez and colleagues at Indiana University analyzed over 60,000 adults from the NHANES and followed them out for about 12 years. And the key finding, physically active participants had significantly lower liver-specific mortality across all drinking categories. Among non-heavy drinkers, exercise was associated with a 48% lower liver death risk. Among heavy drinkers, 36% lower death risk. Among binge drinkers, a remarkable 69% lower liver mortality rate.
Those are staggering numbers. And it wasn't just exercise. Diet quality was even more protective. People in the top quartile of the healthy eating index had 86% and 84% lower liver mortality risk among heavy and binge drinkers, respectively.
And a really important finding here, the survival benefits were substantially greater in women than in men. So for women who we know are more susceptible to alcohol-related liver disease, the protective effect of a healthy lifestyle was even more pronounced.
Finally, some good news for us.
There you go.
It's like with perimenopause, I feel like everything's downhill. Finally, we get a win.
Exercise and drink.
Yeah, that's out of everything I've learned, I feel like that's been my take home. This is huge because earlier we talked about women having a much higher relative risk for alcoholic liver disease, and the fact that they also derive greater benefit from exercise and healthy eating. That's actionable information, right? We all can use that in our everyday lives.
Totally. And kind of rounding out some of this liver data, there's a 2024 study published in Alcohol and Alcoholism journal from the Mass General Brigham Biobank, which looks specifically at patients who are diagnosed with alcohol use disorder. About 2,000 of them, followed them over roughly a 10-year period. Those who exercised at least 2.5 hours per week had significantly lower rates of alcohol-associated liver disease.
And the dose-response relationship was also encouraging. Each additional hour of exercise per week provided additional protection. Even people exercising less than 2.5 hours per week saw some benefit, suggesting that any amount of physical activity is better than none.
And I think that's a really important message for patients who are struggling with alcohol use. You don't have to run marathons, but some movement is actually protective.
So, like, I'm a math person. Well, I'm Indian, so of course I'm a math person. And we were forced to do Kumon, and we forced that upon our children too. But, like, in my head, if I do one really solid hour of physical activity, it kind of translates to one alcohol serving.
Is that the take home that you want to give patients?
No, that's like personalized recommendations for myself. That's personalized medicine.
If you see Nisha at the gym, she's drinking that day.
Yeah.
Got it.
Not always, but like, especially on vacation. We don't drink every day, but on vacation, we definitely like to drink, or when we go out to eat. So I don't think deprivation is the answer. And I think a lot of patients get scared away in the longevity space because they think they have to give up everything that they enjoy. That's my point.
Yeah.
Not the 1-to-1 ratio. I don't do that.
One more study worth mentioning. There's a 2025 paper in Frontiers in Nutrition by Zhang and colleagues, which looked at this relationship specifically in patients with established cardiovascular disease. So again, using NHANES database data from over 4,000 cardiovascular disease patients, they found that a sedentary lifestyle combined with even minimal alcohol use was associated with elevated mortality risk. So for cardiac patients, the exercise alcohol interaction is even more clinically relevant.
All right. And since you're writing your book, why don't you put things into an evolutionary context for us?
That's right. I can't do an episode without connecting it back to evolutionary mismatch theory. I think it kind of really illuminates what's happening here.
Yep, here it comes.
That's right. So if you think about this from the ancestral environment, our Paleolithic ancestors were extraordinarily physically active. Estimates range really between, 8,000, 10,000 to 15,000 steps per day of movement, combined with regular high intensity efforts from hunting, climbing, building, carrying. And, what was their ethanol exposure? Essentially zero, perhaps minimal, from some naturally fermented fruits on rare occasion, but nothing resembling the consistent, concentrated alcohol exposure of our modern life.
So our bodies evolved in a context of high physical activity and very low alcohol exposure. And now we've flipped the narrative, right? We have a ton of alcohol in society and not very much physical movement.
Exactly. The modern default is kind of low physical activity and readily available alcohol. That combination, sedentary plus alcohol, is the quintessential mismatch. And what these studies that we just talked about are essentially showing us is that when you restore one side of that ancestral equation by being more physically active, you recover some of the metabolic resilience that our bodies have actually evolved for.
So in a sense, exercise isn't doing something extra or magical when you drink, but it is restoring a baseline that evolution assumed would always be there.
You're right. So the HUNT study found that declining into the lowest 20% of fitness was a more powerful mortality predictor than moderate changes in alcohol intake. From an evolutionary standpoint, that truly makes sense, right? Our physiology was designed around this constant movement. When you remove that, every system from liver metabolism, immune function, cardiovascular health, even our sleep architecture. It all becomes more fragile and less able to handle insults from alcohol. Our system generates anti-inflammatory cytokines from exercise, and that is why movement is protective. It's part of the process in our body. It's counterintuitive that exercise, which we think of as causing small amounts of damage, that it's actually the thing that helps to promote a reduction in inflammation in the body. And I think this really connects to one of the core themes of the book and this podcast. The horsemen of chronic disease, they don't really operate in isolation. Alcohol impacts sleep, which impacts metabolic health, which impacts cardiovascular health, which impacts brain health. But exercise actually touches all of those systems too, in the opposite direction.
Yeah, it's the closest thing, right? Exercise is the closest thing we have to a universal antidote. Not a perfect one, as the data clearly shows. Exercise cannot fully neutralize alcohol's harms, but the most broadly protective intervention that we know of is exercise and physical activity.
What do we actually do with all this information?
Yeah, so let's go over some practical takeaways. The big picture is great, but let's talk about what our listeners should actually do with all of this information. Because I know people are going to ask, okay, so can I drink or not?
And let's face it, the honest answer is it depends on what your goals are, what your current risk factors are, and how willing you are to being honest with yourself. But here, I think we'll go over some of the key principles that we'd like to offer.
Yeah. Number one, if you don't drink, don't start. You're good. There's no reason to begin drinking for health benefits. That ship has sailed as we get older, and the data just doesn't support drinking for any kind of health benefit.
Number two, if you do drink, the single most important thing you can do for your long-term health is maintain your cardiovascular fitness. The data consistently shows that being fit and drinking moderately is associated with much better outcomes than being sedentary and abstaining completely from alcohol. That's not a pass to drink recklessly. It's an argument for making fitness non-negotiable.
Number three, aim for at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise per week, or 75 minutes of vigorous exercise, or better yet, both. That's the threshold that showed up consistently across the British Journal of Sports Medicine study, the UK Biobank data, and that liver-specific research. So zone 2 cardio, which we've covered in previous episodes, this is your best friend, and an occasional HIIT workout, you're good to go.
Yeah, zone 2 would put you into that moderate intensity, and then the HIIT workout is contributing to that vigorous exercise. Number 4, pay attention to your diet along with your exercise. The Journal of Hepatology data showed that a high quality diet was actually even more protective for the liver than what exercise was. A diet high in vegetables, fruits, whole grains, seafood, plant-based proteins, and healthy fats, while low in added sugars and solid fats, provided a remarkable protection even amongst heavy drinkers.
Number 5, be honest about your drinking patterns. A glass of wine with dinner 3 times a week is very different exposure than 4 drinks on a Saturday night. So we know that binge drinking is particularly damaging to the liver, and exercise's protective capacity has real limits at that level. As that hepatologist Dr. Elliot Tapper put in his commentary on this research, binge drinking will chew through a liver in a few years, especially as we get older.
That's right. Number 6, if you are drinking and not sleeping well, connect the dots here. Track what your heart rate variability is. Track your sleep quality. Most people are shocked when they see the objective data on what even 2 drinks does to their sleep architecture. We've had patients who cut alcohol and saw immediate dramatic improvements in their HRV, their resting heart rate, and their subjective energy levels. This is where I think we've talked about this before. drinking earlier in the day is preferable to drinking right before bed. If you drink at 3 p.m., 2 drinks, it's all out of your system well before going to bed at 9 or 10 p.m. And then you don't see that same hit to your negative hit to your sleep architecture.
And number 7, especially for our female listeners, the data shows women face higher risk from alcohol across multiple organ systems: liver, breast, our cardiovascular system, our brain health. But it also derives greater benefit when we exercise and we are eating in a healthy manner. So if there's one population for whom the stay active, eat well advice, moderate your drinking message is most critical, it's us, women.
And look, we talked about this. We're not prohibitionists. We're not saying alcohol is pure evil and you're a bad person if you enjoy it. What we're saying is the science has gotten pretty clear about this. And really, the stakes are real and the protective strategies are actually within your control. You don't need a prescription. You really just need a pair of gym shoes to go for that run, or really spend a little bit of time doing some resistance training so that you're getting the stimulus that your body needs to offset some of these insults that we may partake in.
Yeah, and maybe some self-awareness about that third margarita.
Or fourth or fifth.
Yeah, nowadays I can't. I mean, even 3, I'm toast.
Yeah,
it's rare.
It's not like when we were 25.
Nope.
All right, so let's do our 30-second elevator pitch. If someone asks you what this episode was about, here's what you should tell them.
Yep. If you only remember the few things out of this whole episode, alcohol is not risk-free at any dose. It's a carcinogen. It disrupts sleep. It damages your liver. And the old glass of wine is good for your heart advice was based on completely flawed data. So we've debunked that.
But, and this is a big but, maintaining cardiorespiratory fitness through regular exercise provides significant measurable protection against many of alcohol's harms. Multiple large studies show that fit, moderate drinkers consistently outlive sedentary non-drinkers. Exercise reduces all-cause mortality risk, cancer mortality risk, and liver-specific mortality risk in patients who drink.
Exercise doesn't erase alcohol's damage. It reduces risk. It doesn't remove it. So the protection has its limitations, especially at heavy and binge drinking levels. But for the majority of people who drink socially or moderately when on vacation, fitness is the single most powerful modifier of that risk.
So bottom line, get your 150 minutes of exercise in, eat your vegetables, and if you're going to drink, make sure you've earned it with a good zone 2 session.
Or at least a walk to the restaurant.
And back. Baby steps. Thanks for listening to another episode of the MD Longevity Lab podcast, where we are playing the long game. If you found this episode useful, please share it with someone that needs to hear it. Please leave us a review. And if you want personalized guidance on optimizing your biomarkers, your fitness, your health span, check us out at mdlongevitylab.com.
Don't forget to follow us on social. We're on Instagram, TikTok. We're too old for TikTok, but we're on it. Check out our Substack. Vikas does longer form articles, which have kind of been a hit. And if you're currently enjoying a glass of wine while listening to this,
no judgment,
right? Just make sure you also got in your workout for today.
All right, guys, we will see you next time. Stay fit, play the long game.
Thank you for playing the long game with MD Longevity Lab. You can visit us at www.mdlongevitylab.com to learn more about how we can support you on your journey. Stay connected with us on social media at MD Longevity Lab for tips, updates, and behind-the-scenes insights. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love it if you subscribed, left us a rating, or shared it with someone you know who's also playing the long game. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.